Works meeting Wednesday, October the 15th, 2008.
Thank you, sir. Everything is special. This is not special. Because they're
So these are consents. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7.
Have a little
4, 5, 7.
an illegal. There's a TV timeout.
Mr. Wonderful LaBranche, before we do 8, I just want to get consent from my colleagues on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7.
I had a couple questions on 5.
So we're going to pull 5 and put that for discussion. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7.
Okay.
So moved. So anybody dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7, it's been approved. You can go home.
No. Go back to work. It's 3
You
o'clock.
go back to work.
Come on.
8 and 9.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7, approved on consent. Ms. Smith, with your indulgence there, I'd like to pull number 8,
Certainly.
special for Mr. LeBon.
Anything for Mr. LeBon.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon in the Public Works Committee of the City Council. I think it's so special that we continue this thought and really advance this thought as it comes to greening our city and greening our alleys. Prior to the meeting, we were talking about the great Dorothy Green and how she caused such a tremendous movement as a person as it related to public health, the benefits of Heal the Bay, and all the way up and down. And I always believe, personally, and I know I talked with Dorothy about this, how clean streets and streets upstream make a difference for what goes downstream. And opportunity to green parts of Los Angeles does correct that in the beginning. Paula Daniels of our Board of Public Works is going to open up here in a moment. She is a superstar in this effort here, and I'm very proud of her efforts here. I've read about green alleys around the country. I have alleys in my district. I've cleaned alleys in my district when I started with the city 34 years ago. Alleys are special. And in the concept of Los Angeles alleys, different than Long Beach or Pasadena alleys, and I don't know Santa Monica because I don't get too far west often enough, they create spaces for people to come and gather in a positive way. Not the kind of alleys you saw Jimmy Cagney in those 1935 classic movies with the Bowery Boys. That being said, this program has been very successful, and I ask you to review this so we could forward this to council. We also have a great professor from the University of Southern California who will be formally introduced momentarily, who contributes greatly to the concept of urban space. Urban space is all we got. You know, if we really do it right, which we can make a difference, and this is that program. So with that in mind, I want to call on Paula Daniels, and you could introduce the professor. And also, we got great support from our Environmental Affairs Department as well. And I'm going to give everybody a seat up, okay, right here.
And let me say this, Mr. LeBange, with your great introduction and your leadership, that on the 20th of this month, we are working on those parking spaces behind Abbott Kinney, and they're all going to be the green alley concept with the permeate for the soil through the pavement. So we're literally going to be doing that right there in Venice starting next week.
Very good. Thank you for your leadership.
Mr. Chair,
It's
could
a
I
joy.
read the item?
Please do.
For the public record. Item number 8, Board of Public Works report in response to motion, Lavange, Hahn, Rosendahl, relative to the feasibility of implementing a green alley program in the city and related matters. This item has also been referred to the Energy and Environment Committee.
Thank you. Thank you so much, council members, and thank you for the introduction, Council Member LaBange, and I appreciate your reference to Dorothy Green. I think if I speak of her, I won't be able to get through this.
Yeah, we're going tomorrow to the
So-
funeral, 2 o'clock.
So, but thank you for that mention. I am really pleased to be here today and to introduce our team. There's more than the people that sit at the table. We'll be talking about 3 items today. One of them will be green alleys, and Dr. Jennifer Walsh from USC will be speaking about that. We also have Beth Gines from the Environmental Affairs Department who will have a few comments about what we're moving forward today. And there's others who are on the Green Streets Committee team who, if you can raise your hand, those of you who are here, that we've got planning and some others. I think there's some others here. Anybody who's here in support, how's that? And I think we have some people that testify in support.
Oh, she's terrific.
Horsewoman, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm up
Did
here
you
with,
donate 2 horses today or something?
Yes, yes, and we thank.
I did.
And
The group
three
that raised the
great-looking
money.
blondes, by the way. This is a terrific team. Okay, so there's 3 items today, just to remind you that were combined. There's an alternative street surfaces report that was continued from last time, and it has its own set of recommendations. There's a new set of recommendations from the Green Streets Committee on green streets, and then we'll have a set of recommendations also with from the Green Alley Subcommittee, and they're all in the combined report that you have before you. And basically, these recommendations all together are to make available these green streets elements, which we'll be talking about, to people who construct sidewalks and so forth in the city. I'm very encouraged to hear about what's happening in your district, Councilman Rosendahl. You've been wonderful.
You are in the district, and we're honored to have you in the district.
I can say that I've been speaking with neighborhood councils and community councils for months now about this, and they're very eager to see these types of things become available to them. So the suite of recommendations you have before you is to make that happen. So it's to support the process, it's to begin the pilot process in earnest. We do already have some pilot projects funded, but it's to get your approval to keep going. And to, very importantly, to develop design guidelines, which will make it available to people to use as they construct projects like the Bureau of Engineering in their street improvement projects and so forth. They also look for us to start testing and evaluation and to incorporate it into planning documents. So just really quickly, I know I gave you a presentation last time. This is just to catch everybody up to speed. We're talking about green infrastructure, and this comes under the umbrella of low-impact development. That's the large term for what all these pieces are, and it's a strategy to capture and infiltrate urban runoff throughout the watershed. We know why. It'll help clean up the water. What I want to emphasize here is that low-impact development, again, is the whole suite of things, and all the pieces we're going to talk about today are elements of that. Green streets, having these elements in green streets is one, having it in green alleys, using porous pavement. Redirected roof runoff is another thing. It's not part of what is before you today, but I just want to let you know that's the type of thing that's part of all the things that you can do to make a difference in collecting water. So the idea is to distribute these best management practices throughout the watershed. That's an example of one way to do it. And to reduce the amount of hardscape everywhere you can. So it would be in driveways, and we have that's part of the porous pavement option. And then also this right here shows you a green streets design that exists right now in Los Angeles on Hope Street.
The before the slide there in the driveway.
Yep.
Are those pieces of whatever that is, are they porous as well, or just in between?
In this case, it's just in between, so it's to reduce pervious surface.
I saw in that greening exhibition that they had that kind of stuff that actually the water would go through.
Yes. And that's porous pavement. That's one of the reports before you today. So the suite of recommendations attached to that would be to have us, to authorize us to keep moving forward.
And there's a thing called Grasscrete, is that correct? Yeah, that's a
Right.
real good thing.
That's also part of that. So this design right here, moving on to the street near Hope Street, the brown part that you can see in that design is a grate over a curb inlet, which takes the water in and then it sinks in through a recessed parkway. We want to develop design guidelines for that so it can become readily available and then can start doing it all over the place. And you can do it on residential sites. We're focused on public properties. You can also do it on commercial sites. There's lots of types of things you can do to make these designs done the right way. So here's an example of another green street. I showed you some examples before. Here's a bump out, which we don't necessarily have to do, but it's an option. And again, this is all about making options available. This is how porous pavement works that you just asked about, Councilman Rosendahl. Yeah. So it does require a little more work because you have to excavate more deeply. And that's the Grasscrete that you were also asking about, Councilman Labange. So I think you all know the benefits, but it's worth stating. This can offer solutions for a lot of the problems facing us. One is polluted runoff. It won't take care of trash, but it will take care of the other pollutants that are in our urban runoff. And if all public right-of-way were converted to more pervious types of solutions, you could address, some studies have shown you could address nearly 40% of the water quality issues that way. And because infiltrating stormwater this way could recharge the groundwater basin, you could save a lot of imported water. And imported water has an energy cost associated to it, so there's a lot of benefits and more here. I'm going to skip through this because I really want us to get on to the Green Alley presentation, but I just wanted to give you some context for where we are. So this is today, the little white box is the Green Streets report to you today. We're already working on looking at maintenance funding options as well. We have a task force that has been created, and we're earnestly and diligently at work on that with the Bureau of Engineering, Street Services, the CAO's office, myself. Commissioner Cardenas is also working on it. We'd love to have the CLA involved if they can, so that we can look at ways to some options for funding the maintenance of these projects once built. Most of them are the capital funding is available through various bonds and grants that we've been able to get and are identifying. And as we go forward, we'd like to take time to develop a suite of design guidelines in different sorts of best management practices, test and evaluate them, and then as time goes on, develop more projects and policies. So that's where we are today, and that's where the set of recommendations in the report before you will take us if you agree to them. So next, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Walsh, who's on our Green Alleys Subcommittee and has been doing a lot of terrific work at USC along those lines.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here today to talk about a little bit about alleys. And I think I need to get out of this presentation. That's okay.
Great, you know how to do that? Computer stuff.
I think that should be it.
Yeah, I asked Mitch to do it.
Just want to see if three old guys. Three old guys. For sure.
Well, when you're in front of 200 undergraduates, it concentrates your mind. You have to get these things up on the screen fast. So I wanted to talk a little bit about green alleys. Paula has said a little bit about it, and you probably heard a little bit about it. And of course, Councilman Labange knows quite a bit about it and has a motion in front of council concerning green alleys. What I wanted to do today is just give you some background about our research on green alleys, and also talk a little bit about the kinds of projects that people in the city, for example, are thinking about, and in the community are thinking about with respect to demonstration projects for green alleys. The city has over 900 linear miles of alleys. That's about 12,000 individual segments. The area, alleys on average are about 18 feet wide. That constitutes 3 square miles. That's half the size of Griffith Park, by the way. They're often perceived as unsafe and nuisances, but they also represent potential open space, and they're also an environmental resource. Alleys are not all over the city, but they're in many, many parts of the city. The heaviest concentrations are in South LA, East LA. There's some in West LA, especially Venice. And also in the harbor area. They're clearly associated with certain periods of development, older development, and importantly, I think for us, they're located in very park-poor neighborhoods. They're, again, in lower income communities, communities of color, high-density communities. At USC, we did a study in which we audited 300 alleys across the city, and we also held focus groups with residents to understand their attitudes. We did some soil sampling to find out about alley soil pollution, and did an analysis of the kind of barriers to transforming alleys from often kind of empty, unused hardscape spaces to something that could be a green infrastructure for the city. And we had several community partners, Neighborhood Land Trust, Pacoima Beautiful Tree People, and TPL. What we found basically was that alley conditions reflect quality of life and safety conditions in the areas surrounding them, which is what you would expect. We also found, which we didn't quite expect, was that alleys are underutilized, that for most of the day, nothing at all is happening in alleys. There's nobody there. The residents often are worried about alleys, particularly in some parts of the city, but they would like to see alleys converted so that they could be used for physical activity and makes neighborhoods more walkable and serve as urban connectors. Our soils analysis suggested that alleys, most of them are paved, but the unpaved ones are not very contaminated, more than, say, any street you might pick and look at the dirt underneath in LA. And alleys are not very green. We found very few examples of greened alleys, but they have a big potential. So some of these things are really the same kinds of things that were mentioned by Paula in terms of benefits, runoff, making the city cooler, but also promoting physical activity and serving as urban connectors. And so we have a set of planning and policy goals that are really reflected in the work that the Green Alleys Subcommittee is doing, which really focus on getting design guidelines developed and planning criteria, so alleys and different kinds of attitudes and uses of alleys become kind of part of the everyday process in the city as planning and development go on. I just wanted to show you some pictures now. This is Wilmington. This is an alley that we looked at for a demonstration project. It's clean on this day. It's not always so clean, but you can see that very little is going on, and it's very hardscaped. It's located near the East Wilmington Greenbelt and the Wilmington Elementary School, and serves as a perfect connector that would allow kids to walk safely from the school to the park and back again. Another example is an example ongoing in Hollywood right now. It's the Selma Hotel. Some of you may have heard about it. It's a most unlikely location for a boutique hotel because this is its neighborhood, and that's what the alley looks like now. Again, cleaner than when I was there a couple weeks ago. But this is what the developers of the hotel want to do. They want to make this a very active area, not just for their guests, but for everybody in the neighborhood, with art sales and dining on the alley, vendors, and so on. So, and the design of this is, you may not be able to see this, or it's not that clear, but all of this would be porous paving, so it's also providing environmental benefits. In the wholesale and retail area, CRA in particular is interested in the fashion district and creating alleys, kind of converting alleys in the fashion district. And there's already a developing alley network. And there are alleys now that have storefronts and displays and are very walkable. And that's what really they're trying to achieve. Areas that are populated, active, walkable, and also, if they're designed right, can be permeable and provide environmental benefits as well. There's just some other examples of where the CRA is thinking about alleys and renovation or transformation of alleys in the fashion district. And one of the things that they're thinking about is really creating alley networks so that people can walk around a whole district, not just one little segment, but walk around a whole district via alleys that are not exposed to traffic, not exposed to the pollution that comes with traffic, and that also are venues for social interaction and retail activity. There are issues that need to be looked at in planning these kinds of projects: pedestrian issues, parking, loading and unloading, safety issues. But the analysis of these alleys suggests that there are enough of them that can be, the parking and pedestrian issues can be handled, that they can be successfully kind of transformed. In residential areas, I think the goal is really to perform all of the environmental benefits that the green streets and green alleys ideas can perform with bioswales, with permeable paving, and so forth. But it's also to activate communities. I'm sure you all know how poor parts of the city are, but also there's an obesity epidemic. In fact, I was just at NIH yesterday talking about how the built environment is related to the obesity epidemic. And alleys provide areas that are protected and can be transformed for very accessible recreation. These are some ideas about how to design them. Again, with signs, with paving elements, and so on, to make them attractive and inviting, and to encourage activity. With mid-block crossings to make them make it safe for people to go from one part of an alley to another, mirrors, and so on. These are some of the features that can be designed into green alleys. Again, permeable paving, low albedo, high albedo pavement, dark sky lighting, solar lights, and so on, to make them very sustainable. And also to enhance walkability and attractiveness. I think this is the really the last slide. The long-term goals here, I think, are to realize the potential of 900 miles of alleys so that they're usable and helpful features of the urban landscape to improve neighborhood quality of life and to be a model for environmental innovation. So this is a picture
That's
of...
the picture.
That's the picture, right?
Oh, yes. I'm not on the committee, and I vote yes.
This woman was interviewed by the LA Times, and her picture was in the paper, and that was a few weeks ago. She called me last week and said, "I'm so excited that this is being looked at. I love my alley. I worked hard to make my alley a wonderful community resource, and anytime you need me to tell my story, I'll be there." So she's really wonderful, and she's done a wonderful job with her alley. Thank you. Yes, I have copies of some reports.
Yeah, we got some reports.
One-pagers about alleys that you're welcome, and a copy of the presentation if anybody wants it.
And Emily Gable is here too, which on the planning issue, which is
Yeah.
great.
That's right.
And environmental affairs, just to let you know. Mr. Chair, you saw that great presentation by
Yes.
the professor and the commissioner.
Yes.
I just know this is something right down your alley.
Better than up your street.
We love you, Tom. You're the best. Thank you for coming, too. Okay. Mr. Smith, did you want to comment on this first?
I just had a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
And a suggestion for the commissioner as well. We did a permeable sidewalk in my district a couple years ago, and I got a phone call from a constituent that said, you got to get with your city people that do the sidewalks because it looks really crummy. They did a really poor job. And I explained to them it looks like that on purpose because it's the permeable cement, and it looks different. So they didn't understand. So I think where you do these things, it might be nice to put some sort of signage up, let people know this is a sustainable action on the part of the city. It's supposed to look different. Don't call us and complain about
Right.
the quality of the cement work that was done. So that'd be benefit.
That's a really good suggestion.
It'll save Carmel and the staff over some
No,
problems.
I love that suggestion. I'm hoping we can do that at Hope
And
Street as
take
well.
credit for it, too, and let people know what we're doing, why we're doing it.
Right.
Have we looked at maintenance costs? One thing I know is when you have those blocks and you have the grass growing, and you got to essentially mow your driveway. So it's a little different. Some of this you're looking at private property, but others you're talking about public properties. What will it do to maintenance costs for the department?
Most of what we're looking at in the presentation to you today is public property, and I just gave you examples in our slides for private. We are looking at that as, I mentioned, we have a maintenance task force, and we have some data that's being gathered from the Bureau of Street Services. Hugh Lee of the Bureau of Street Services was on a call with me earlier today, where they're going to provide, get an estimate of three sets of numbers. One, what it would currently take to maintain all green infrastructure in the city. And I think as we look at maintenance, we need to look at not only these new designs, but existing landscape to maintain. Two, what it would take to get it to its optimal level. That's a separate number. Then three, the incremental cost of these particular design elements. And because it's new in Southern California, we have some estimates, but not enough yet to project out, but we're working on that, and we expect to have that by the time our report's done, and the goal is to have that report done early December.
Very good. And I would hope, and some sort of the professor can work with you on something I learned at SE at least, is when doing a cost-benefit analysis, that you look at the externalities. That there's a cost, there's a benefit over there you assign a value to, where it may cost one department a little more money to do something, that the value is offset, and you can put a dollar amount on that. Because too often around here, I see us say, it costs us X number of dollars to do this, and we never take the thought process beyond what the value of that is.
Right.
You can assess cost values as well.
Cost avoidance.
Avoidance.
And
And
cost
so
avoidance.
all those things, and we're not real good in government in looking to that second level of analysis, I don't think. So I hope we do that, because there's tremendous value in this, but there's going to be additional cost to the departments we have to recognize in our budgets.
That's true.
So
With the budget being as impacted as it is quite a concern, so we definitely are taking a hard look at that.
impact is a nice word. It's too gentle. Too gentle. But,
Thank you, Ms. Smith. A couple of questions on my end. I'll just give you a couple of anecdotal stories. Mar Vista, where I live, many folks have gated their alleys, and they gated it historically for what was concerns or issues. And then when they've gated it, and they're not paved alleys, things grow in the alley. I personally have taken a piece of my alley and grew some sunflowers. the neighbor across the other side of the alley grew some tomato bushes and also some sunflowers. And so when we open up our back yard and look into the alley, some of us even let our dogs run in the alley. I don't, but one of the neighbors does. And so it has become sort of a private public space in the sense that the people in the street. But everybody on both sides of that alley got together, decided to close it. Everybody has a key to it. So, they don't bring their cars into the alley to park or anything. They use the alley for what they want. Others, when I drive around my neighborhood, just have it closed off and there's nothing that's value in the sense of them doing anything with it. But then even in my alley, my neighbor and I talk about getting it brushed down and cleaned up and stuff. But my issue is this. I was told anecdotally that the fire department has issues with some of this idea from a standpoint of safety. In fact, one of the major prominent tree people guy told me that as much as he's tried to get certain things done, the fire department has been against it because of a safety issue. So question number one is, what about neighborhoods that have taken over their neighborhood, put in these things, and are doing what they're doing? Is that okay, and does that fit within your concept?
I'm going to let Dr. Walsh speak about that more, but just briefly, the concept here, at least on my end, is to look at how to change the paving of the alley so that we can infiltrate. Ingress and egress through an alley is a very important attribute of an alleyway that I think Dr. Walsh can talk about more. We have looked into that, and there are issues there.
Great, thank you.
When we started, we actually were thinking that gating might be a solution and doing exactly the kinds of things that you've done in your own alley. It turns out that although there was this nuisance alley abatement program that allowed alleys to be gated, just like your alley was gated and everybody had a key, it was deemed illegal. And the state decided that you had to maintain ingress and egress for residents to get in and out of properties. So gating doesn't seem to be an option unless you actually pedestrianize the space completely and maybe have bollards so that cars can't get in. But that, as you know, is a whole big process to pedestrianize something. There isn't anything legally problematic, however, about redesigning an alley and leaving it open to cars, but making it, for example, a shared street and making it a one lane. And some of the alleys are narrow, but some of them are quite wide. And you can have paths and bioswales and bike lanes and so on, as long as cars can still get in and out. Now, in other cities, they've been able to get around this because there are different legal structures. Baltimore is an example, but not here in LA or California, more generally.
And if I could just, were you going to make a presentation?
Well, I can give you a perspective
You
from
both?
planning,
I'd love to hear
but
both. Yeah.
well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity. But I think one of the overriding benefits of being on the Green Streets Committee was that there are several different departments who meet on a regular basis and work out issues of common interest. So, as you know, council members, I work in the Urban Design Studio, and our objective has consistently been to work interdepartmentally to solve some of these problems. So when our partners in the city are Bureau of Engineering and Transportation, we end up with solutions that I think institutionally will outlast all of us, which is, I think, a really good goal. From the planning perspective, though, one of the actions you would take today in approving the report is to direct the planning department to incorporate green streets and green alleys into the community plan program itself, so that the planners in their consultation with community members and others are looking at the bones, the structure of the communities, and looking to see where there might be opportunities. That doesn't take us all the way down to actually getting the construction done, but I think from a policy point of view, it does put us all in the correct direction.
Would you do that as, say, a footnote to the community plan, that it is encouraged? You couldn't exactly specify a street, could you?
Well, I've been very creative with plan language in the past. I think you could say, in this area, within the boundaries of this area, these alleys should be further examined for the potential of making them more permeable on their surface. So I think that the policy language could be a little more directive than it's been in the past to really help agencies focus on areas. And then I'd finally say, in my capacity as the advisory agency when I was doing subdivision approvals, one of the things that we were able to do, and this is a big credit to CRA and the South Group themselves, was to work with that subdivider and the Bureau of Engineering so that they, in fact, did install the planter infiltration systems down at 11th and Hope, which was one of the images you saw. And a clear prerequisite of that was that the property owners agreed to maintain that non-standard improvement in the public right-of-way, so it did not come at any cost to the city. And that's basically been become an SOP in the planning department entitlement process where these opportunities have presented themselves in order to assure that there will be good maintenance. We know the property owners have an investment in making sure their front door is well maintained. So working through the Bureau of Engineering and Street Services, those property owners do execute an agreement to maintain and to accept liability for what we call right now non-standard improvements, and I'm sure we all hope in the future will be standard improvements. So it has really been a joy working with Paula Daniels and Jennifer and my colleagues at EAD and doing this, pursuing
Let me
it.
take Mr. Smith's point a step further. My West LA community plan is now in play.
Right.
There have been several community meetings, there have been planners there. Would we incorporate this process into that community plan, within the community process right now?
The
Could-
planners, yes. I don't see why the planners cannot begin to look at those areas as well.
I would like to make that just part of the requirement.
That
you
is
would
one
do
of your, the recommended steps in the report.
It is.
If you adopt the report
Yeah.
today and the action steps, that's one of
That'd be
the,
excellent.
You'll be telling us to do it.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
you're up. Introduce yourself again for the record. Did you introduce yourself for the record on there? Do it, you just do it.
Emily Gabeletti for the record.
Right on.
Good afternoon. I'm Beth Gines with the Environment LA, which was previously known as the Environmental Affairs Department. We very much support the recommendations in the report. As we mentioned the last time that we were here discussing this, the Environmental Affairs Commission did send a letter along with some specific recommendations. We've made good headway in meeting some of those recommendations. Some of them we will table for a later time. But there is one part of the report which I would really encourage us to move ahead on. And the way the report is written, it asks for Public Works to develop a strategy for the adoption of design guidelines. In the Environmental Affairs Commission's letter of May, they asked for design guidelines to be completed in 120 days, which would be next week. In previous reports, we had looked for design guidelines to be, sped up a little bit. And it seems that now we're back asking just for a strategy for the adoption of the design guidelines. There's impacts on some of the other programs in the city. I mean, the design guidelines would enable anyone that comes in to just take that design, developer that comes in, take that design and implement the types of measures that we're talking about here. It has some impact on our green building programs as well, and the ability to provide standard designs to people that are trying to do the right thing as part of our green building program. So what I would encourage is that we, instead of developing a plan for the design guidelines or a strategy, that we actually set a firm date by which the design guidelines will be done.
Sounds good. Paula, do you agree with that?
well, I agree. I would like to see them done as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I can tell you that there's been a struggle at our department in terms of applying resources to getting a lot of it done, which is why we looked at developing a work plan for it. I think that there's one set of design guidelines, the one I showed you on Hope Street, that there's no reason why it couldn't be done right away because we've already got the B permit drawings for them that we already approved that's already in the ground. So that one could be adopted right away, and it could start getting incorporated into the pending street construction projects. So I think it'd be helpful for our staff to take a look at which ones they can do when. But
Do you
at
wanna
least some of
propose
them.
that back to us at the next Public Works
Well,
meeting,
if
or
you could
what?
take action today, I think it'd be
You
ideal.
can take action
So,
today, and then between now and when it goes before the council, you can
Yeah.
flesh some of that stuff out more?
Yes, and well, I actually think that we could probably adopt that one design guideline
Yeah.
within 30 days. I think that could be done.
So,
That's my
because if we
understanding.
move forward with this, I've not talked to Ms. Smith, obviously, that if we move forward with this, we would want your complete involvement in moving it through the process and keeping all of the family here very tight. And we want the CLA to be part of this process, too.
Yes, we'll all be there.
Yeah, good.
And you're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of what we do today, if you're interested in accepting environmental affairs suggestion, you could ask that one be done, that
That one design, 'cause
That
there's
one
two
design-
places in the report where this.
right, that one design guideline be done along with a strategy for the remainder within 30 days.
Before we take any action, of course, we're going to have public comment on it.
Okay.
I'm confused. You're asking us to adopt just an overarching policy, but we're not going to go forward till we have the standards and all this. And we're
no.
going to set a time frame for that portion of it?
The
come
design
back?
guidelines will be developed over time, so that's what you're directing us to do.
Yeah.
Is to continue to develop them. There's a whole
But
suite.
we don't begin to implement anything until you have those standards. So all we're doing is approving the overarching,
The overarching
Policy.
Policy, you're telling us to go ahead and develop the design guidelines
Yeah.
to begin the testing and
Okay.
evaluation
All right.
and that sort of thing.
And then you'll bring that back to the committee, and we'll go.
And we'll
through
be,
that
and there's,
process.
in here, there's a series of actions telling us to come back to you with reports.
okay.
And my point is that it's.
You want a
it-
timeline on it, though?
Yeah, the language is to develop a strategy.
Too loose.
Too loose. Loosey-goosey. What are we going to do?
Yeah, yeah. We do want to get it done in our lifetime.
Yeah, thank you. And we do appear to have moved back a ways. On
I'd be
this.
happy to see
What-
it done as soon as possible. It's a question of staff resource time.
Well, how bad do you want this?
Pretty bad.
Then get the staff resources.
Yeah,
I mean,
think another
you
thing
know.
that Mr. Smith said earlier, as we go through this budget process, once again, we're another one of these squeezes. We want to make sure that we have everybody on board within that process, seeing this as the right thing to do from a dollars and cents standpoint, because we don't need to get caught in some in-between money issue based on this stuff. That's why street services and all the other parts of the family in Public Works, are they all involved with you on this?
Yes.
Okay. So as long as we have that comfort level, when we start getting to the budget process, would be okay. And even one of your colleagues on the commission that's been talking about potential bond measures in segments of 3, to do our streets, do our stuff, are they, in their mind, incorporating this as well? So that everything
Yes.
we do going forward would be that.
Yes, Commissioner Cardenas is working on the bond, and he's been involved, and he's involved in the maintenance funding task force, and he's involved in a number of these Green Streets meetings and is aware of them, so we're going to
All
work
right,
together to make sure it's
One
part
other
of
thing that I would like, and
it.
it's more provincial from my end, is my neighborhood councils, my homeowner groups, and my other groups, when we get beyond just the overview, I would love to be able to give them printouts, the Venice folks, the other ones, and all their committees, study it and look at it and come up with their own understandings of what they think we can do. And then once we go forward with this, I would like to empower them as much as possible to be part of the action arm working with the city. Because, people love their community. I've done more block parties than I can imagine, and I always talk about we need to create neighborhood watches, we need to have a CERT program, and I'd love to be able to incorporate this conversation within their mindsets as they go forward with beautifying it.
I think that's a great idea, and your Mar Vista Community Council is right on top of
They're
this.
totally
They're
on it.
amazing.
And I know Venice is too, with our
Yeah.
street walks and
Right.
the others. But we even have other areas. I got to tell you, my whole district is looking at its alleys, it's looking at its streets, it's looking at the whole issue. And I think we would love to have them participate in that process, which would be healthy for them.
Yeah, I would like to do that. I think it's a great idea.
Great.
My concern is you brought up your community plan that's going forward. I have my
Yeah.
Granada Hills plan, which is in its final year. How do we then go back to them and say to them, this is something that's coming and we'd like you to consider it now if we really don't have a plan to show them yet, really? Conceptually, we can say, this is what we want to do, but
Well, I mean, there are two ways of dealing with it in the community plan. One is to have a policy that's very strong on green alleys and green streets
Yeah.
without being geographically specific or general. And I think
Back to
Councilman,
the
probably for
footnote
project,
concept.
yeah, a plan that's that far along, and we might look at that as the first step.
Do we want to talk about what the conclusions are, or we take some questions or some comments from the public and then make a final summary?
As you wish, I think there are some comments from the public, so maybe you could do
So
that.
why
and
don't,
then-
why don't I ask 3 seats to fill, to open up, because I want to have 3 people come up who filled out cards. But then, Paul, I'd like you to summarize it of what the recommendations would be,
I'll
okay?
stay here.
8 and 9, I have Christian James from Heald Bay. I have Stephanie, is it Taylor? Stephanie, hi, and is it Carney Sutkin? Carrie, great. From People for Parks, Green LA Coalition, and Heal the Bay. Three very good groups. Go for it first.
Good afternoon. My name is Kirsten James, and I'm the Water Quality Director at Heal the Bay. And I'm here today to commend the Public Works Committee for looking at these three important issues. We see them as vital to water quality in this region and to the overall sustainability of LA. As you know, urban runoff is the #1 source of pollution to our water bodies, and we need these practices such as green streets, which falls under the low-impact development umbrella, in order to get us to where we need to go. And also, as you know, it'll be a big help to meeting TMDL compliance deadlines that are coming up. And as Paula mentioned, it's definitely a great practice for augmenting groundwater supplies, which is definitely something that our region is looking at in these times of drought. So based on all of these things, we definitely urge you to move forward with these recommendations presented before you today. And just a couple little side notes. For one thing, as you look forward and start to implement these and come up with more solid plans, as you will, we recommend that Public Works look at specific performance criteria, and so that we're not just putting in these elements and they're not going to lead to marked improvements. So we want to put in something that's going to actually get us to where we need to go. And sort of an example of this, you may have heard last week the County of LA passed ordinances for low-impact development, and they specified and described what the volume that would need to be either infiltrated or treated would need to be. So we just urge you to look at that as you move forward. And also, you know, a lot of it is talking about the feasibility of these options, and we look for you to define those and come up with alternative BMPs if for some reason feasibility isn't found. And just one other quick note, as I mentioned, the county adopted this low impact development ordinance last week, and one of your recommendation number 6 talks about moving forward with the possibility of an LID ordinance for LA. And we strongly urge you to do that. We strongly urge you to look at the county as an example. We felt that their ordinance was very far-reaching, and the city should move in the same direction. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, too, for that.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Stephanie Taylor, and I'm here with Coalition the Green LA Coalition. And first of all, we'd like to applaud the city and the Green team for this important effort, and also for Commissioner Daniels for her leadership on moving this forward. It's not been easy, but so there's a little bit of some specific comments that I have, and some of this comes from some staff at Tree People. So we absolutely agree with Beth Gines around the guidelines, and I think you understand the importance of the guidelines and really getting those done. And then very specifically, and I don't really know, and Paula, you might know whether or not this is feasible, but one suggestion under the Green Streets recommendation number 3, where you're asking the Public Works, the city basically, to implement Green Streets, that in looking at Green Streets with all the capital improvement projects that are coming up. But we'd also like to include other agencies like DWP, the CRA, and other agencies that have jurisdiction over developments that might be also impacting capital improvement that would involve streets, so that they would also sort of be included in this recommendation as well, if that's feasible.
Can we do that, Paul, and just put it in there? Makes a lot of sense, especially UWP.
Well, I like the idea. I hadn't asked the CRA about it. I can tell you that they're very aggressive in looking at these, and they have quite a commitment to it. They do sit on our committee. I know that I do have a commitment from the Bureau of Engineering, and they've already started looking at all their pending capital improvement projects. They've identified a number. They've evaluated them for the possibility of including Green Streets. They're moving ahead. It's really great to see. Mike Brown has been doing that.
Would we want to do something different with them?
What's that?
With DWP?
DWP is looking at this as well. I mean, I know they're very invested in it. Mark Hanna from DWP is also secured some funding to add Green Streets elements where appropriate. Now, what they want to do is look at where the soils are most optimal for recharge, because that's their goal, is for groundwater recharge. But they're involved in this. So, you know, I can tell you the recommendations that are before you were vetted through our committee. So I agree with what you're saying. That hadn't been part of our committee discussion, so that's why I'm qualifying it. But I don't see that there'd be a problem.
Yeah, when you just brought up DWP, it just something popped in my mind. Throughout a lot of our alleys, we have easements that belong to gas company, water and power, telephone company, whatever. And generally, they come in, if they have to have access, they come in and trench, dig, whatever, and they fill it back up with asphalt. That's traditional way to fix things. They don't have the ability to fix these things because they don't do anything more than asphalt. So how would we deal with easement access for those other public entities?
So they may be having the easements done in a
They may have
different
to
way.
pay us to do them or something. I don't know, but I
You can
just
collaborate with them on that.
yeah, it's just something that came in my mind. You know, I have a lot of trouble. I have a lot of issues with us granting those easements and letting them just trench and fill with asphalt
Where
in
there's
the
a lot
first
of
place. So they don't do a very good job, in my opinion. And well, I always see 2 years later there's cracks in the streets, and I have problems with it. But I think we make it too easy for them, quite frankly. But in these cases, if you're doing a permeable sidewalk or a permeable pavement of some sort, they got no ability to fix that. And the last thing we want them to do is ruin a beautiful landscape with asphalt, which is their traditional filler. So, Doctor, have you seen any examples of that in other cities? How do you resolve that issue?
I'm not sure if I have an answer for this. I do know that the need for, our research suggests that the need for access to alleys, at least, on the part of utilities is, you know, it's mixed. There are many alleys that don't need that kind of access. But I mean, I think that this would be important to explore and hopefully start getting them to change their practices, right?
Because that may be very difficult for them. But
Yeah.
the way to do that would be have them post a bond, and then we come in and do it and fix it with our resources that are already doing this kind of stuff. But just something, take back your task force, and then you can talk about it.
Yeah.
Really
It
wanna
is
get
a
all
yeah.
hands on deck on this.
Yes.
I see a problem brewing. So,
Right, no, that's a good point.
okay.
Right, you were still
I'm
speaking.
sorry.
You weren't finished. You sure? Okay, great.
So, well, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure I answered your question. What I would suggest for the new ideas that are coming up, that what I'd like to see is that you adopt the recommendations that are here. For new ideas, you can ask us to come back maybe the next time. We'll report back on the new ideas.
Good.
And get some
We
responses.
would like
on
to
that.
move on it too.
Okay. So rather than amend
Gotcha.
this,
Gotcha.
let's.
Yeah. You want to move forward. We got it.
My name is Carrie Sutkin. I'm speaking on behalf of People for Parks, and we're here in support of the motion before you. I know a lot of work has been done on that, and, you know, that's important for the city. Specifically, as a nonprofit, we are working on a community school park project where we intend to green school playgrounds and then open them to the public on the weekends. And as we're looking at the funding sources, everyone is looking for best management practices, and we're doing all that we can to explore the playgrounds themselves, but obviously there's sidewalks and curbs and parkways, and we're even finding some cul-de-sacs, city-owned streets that are closed because they're adjacent to elementary schools. They become the entry gate for the children, and we're hoping that we'll be able to work with Bureau of Street Services to develop some Green Street-like improvements that kind of expand the ability of the, you know, of our work, so that we get a more interest in public funding because we can provide better water quality benefits. And so I guess what I'm asking is, since the need is so great and the presentation kind of suggested that there was a priority to look at the underserved areas, especially where alleys are dumping grounds and active nuisances, and where there is a shortage of open space and high public health benefit, if perhaps you do prioritize and perhaps you consider some of these kind of layouts where you have streets around an elementary school where there's a greening project proposed and a city street that's underutilized, and so that maybe we can get a few in your pilot program and I know it's complicated because you're bringing in more entities, but it provides a bigger benefit for the multi-benefit, investment that the city is obviously going to be making when you have other funders as well.
Sure.
So it's just in support, and maybe we can work some arrangements.
Good point.
Thank you.
And
Paul, you want to react now and make some final comments?
Yes, and thank you for the people who came to speak in support. We really appreciate it. And our goal here is to understand whether or not we have your support. It would make a lot of difference to us to know that. And if you do pass this motion, it does express that support, and it will let us all know that you're behind this and that we should start in earnest and with all speed to move this forward in as many ways as we can. And that's what this suite of recommendations is about. It's to make sure we get going and we can tell everyone who's working on this that this is important to the council as it is to Public Works and the Commission of Public Works, and that we can start with doing the design guidelines, doing the testing and evaluation, and putting this in wherever we can.
Did you want to comment first?
The only thing you haven't really answered is when do you think you come back with those standards?
I'm confident that we can get the design guidelines done for that one best management practice within 30 days. But I do have our staff working on developing the work plan. They'd have to list out the whole series of best management practices that are going to be subject to design guidelines and then give you a timeline. So I think that will take place over a period of time. The other cities that are working on this, just to give you some
kind of word to me, because I've been around here so long.
Over a period of time.
When I hear bureaucrats say, we're working on this, and in a period of time we'll have that done, City Week is a month long.
Yes, I know. Well,
Are we talking about in the fiscal year 08, 09? Are we talking about the calendar year 09? Are we talking about 10? When are we talking
my
about?
experience so far has been that I've been given to understand it would take about 9 months per design guideline. But this one I know can get done right away. Just for context, the City of Ventura has started a Green Streets program, and they do have some design guidelines they're working on, but they've been working on them for about a year, and they're not quite ready to go final with them. They're very specific engineering standards that they want to sort out. But I feel confident.
At least a year or more.
At least a year, yeah. I feel confident we can get that one done right away.
Did you want to make
The
a final
alternative point of view is when I've been here a year, and when I started here, one of the first things I became involved in was Green Streets with Paula. And at that time, we were given a deadline of by August of this year, 2 months ago, that the design standards would be completed.
Right.
And now we're back to setting up a strategy. And so I just think the priority of the design standards just needs to be raised with the folks that are developing this.
Okay.
I had requested that of our staff.
Okay, what I'd like to do is this. I'd like to, with Mr. Smith's support, approve this as your guidelines, as your backdrop. You'll come back and give us reports periodically on where we are on answering some of these questions that you put down. Like you put down 9 points under Green Streets, and some are action-oriented points. Green Alleys, you have another 10. And that you report back so that we get a sense of comfort of a timeline actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I'd like to do this in memory of Dorothy Green.
Thank you.
Whose funeral we're all going to tomorrow, because she's been the spirit behind a lot of this, and I know a spirit behind you and a lot of other people. And in her memory, we all did an adjourning motion yesterday. A lot of people spoke.
you.
This is the real adjourning motion.
Thank
It's
you.
something that takes her vision and goes forward with it. But it's going to be your responsibility as chair of this overall committee to give us periodic reports. In fact, I would like, when we pass this through the council, that a month from after we pass it through the council, you come back to our committee and give us an update of
I
where
think
we
that would
are
be-
with answering these questions and what we need to do. And
I would
then
like to do that.
We'll go from there.
I think in partnership and working with you, it will help a lot. So thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing. As Dorothy would say, we really have no time to waste.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly.
I would like to move as quickly as
We
possible
have a
with
motion
this.
for this. So moved and second. Congratulations. Thank you
you.
very much. for
Thank
this.
you.
Mr. Chair, for clarity of the public record, we are approving recommendations in Section C as it pertains to green alleys. That would be for item 8. In this report, in the October 15, 2008 report from the Board of Public Works, would then Section A be approved for item 9?
Yes.
Okay. Fortunately, section B pertains to green streets, for which we don't have an agendized item on that. So that will need to be handled.
That was not part of a council motion that came up as part of the last hearing we had here. You asked for a series of recommendations on Green Street, so we brought them forward.
Did you,
So-
what would,
From that perspective? Incorporate it?
what did you say we're doing in item 9? Because you
Well,
didn't even
item
call item 9.
Pertains, fortunately, this is a combined report that actually spans
Yeah.
2 items. Item 8, which is the green alleys. Item 9 covers environmentally friendly street surfacing materials.
And I asked some questions about it because you didn't call item 9.
No, I did not call item 9. Just we seem to have combined them, so just for clarity on the public record, obviously we can.
In that case, let's withhold for a moment then, because I have some questions about item 9 then. All
Very
right?
good.
And for legal purposes, why don't you read it so we can discuss it?
Absolutely. Okay, let me go ahead and do that.
The report combined the two.
Item 9 is continued from August 6, 2008, Board of Public Works report and joint Board of Public Works Environmental Affairs Department report and communication from the Environmental Affairs Commission in response to motion, Lavange Perry, relative to the feasibility of using environmentally friendly street surfacing materials. This item was considered by the Energy and Environment Committee on July 1st, 2008.
Yeah, we combined this because it is part of the suite of best management practices that go into green streets and low-impact development. I don't know, Street Services said they were going to be here. I don't know if there's somebody here on that. Hugh Lee is the one who has specific information on the character of permeable pavement and so forth. But if you have any,
Well, and if there's no one here, maybe we better continue that portion of it. My biggest concern is we have gone through Mr. Rosendahl and I are in lockstep on this. We are never satisfied with our street repaving program.
Right.
It's never sufficient. It's never enough. We'll never get caught up at the rate we're going. My big concern is we went through a tremendous process of our street resurfacing program of developing the slurry seal program, which won a national award. And slurry sealing saves our streets. You can't slurry seal some of these permeable surfaces. And so are we scrapping our slurry seal program, our award-winning program,
No.
if we're going toward permeable streets?
no, and what this report does is it talks about, sorry, we had talked about it last time, so I forgot to mention what this is about. We'd looked at alternative street surfaces as part of a report that, a motion that was brought forward before I was appointed here, actually, to look at this as an option in streets. And what our street services folks let us know is that it's not a good option for streets themselves. But we know that it has benefits for the gutters and for driveways and so forth.
Fine.
So what this does is it directs us to look at using permeable pavement systems in gutters, parking areas, landscape medians, tree wells, and meandering sidewalks.
Okay.
Not on the streets.
Not on the streets.
There's too much
So
heavy
it's
traffic
kind
on
of mislabeled
streets.
then.
It's called street servicing materials because that's what the motion was.
Yeah.
And what we are telling you back is it's not appropriate for streets.
Right.
But it is an option in other areas, as we've reported. It's an option in driveways. It's an option in landscape medians. And most of these recommendations would ask the Bureau of Engineering and the Department of Public Works to look at using it where feasible. So in other words, as you have a project, you can look into whether or not the soils are right for it, whether or not the load bearing is right for it. Does the fire department have an issue for it? All those considerations that would go into a determination of whether or not it's feasible should be looked at before it's employed as an option. But again, as with the other recommendations, it's telling us to go forward with looking at where we could possibly use it and to develop pilot projects. So that's what the series of recommendations is here.
Okay, one other concern that I have also is, and I said I had done a sidewalk with the permeable cement, is there's a cost factor, and it is higher. I have thousands of swales in my district that are cracked, broken, and I can't get fixed. I have tens of, if not dozens of miles of sidewalk curbing that is broken from the 1994 earthquake. It's never been fixed, never will be fixed, because we never have money to fix that. So if we're talking about an additional cost factor to just do this stuff, and I can't even get the stuff fixed in my district that goes back to the Northridge earthquake and before that even, I just wonder if it's a good use of our money. I mean, as much as I believe in this and want to do this, Our resources are so thin when it comes to these things. How do I, in good conscience, say, you know what, we're going to do 10 miles of this year instead of the normal 15 because we want to do it nicer and better, but I've got 100 miles of stuff that's not getting fixed this year. How can I make that argument?
Did you want, sure, go ahead.
One of the findings that we did have in this is that if you look at the cost of permeable pavement, which is higher, and this goes back to the point that you were making earlier in the meeting, which is that, but then if you turn around and look at the permeable paving costs as a stormwater management system, then your cost becomes more effective. So it's the cross-departmental looks at things, which was the main point of this report.
I get that concept. I don't get that I've got 100 miles of backlog that I can't touch because there's no money, and then we're going to reduce the amount of work we're doing because the cost factor is included. I can't go to Prop O committee and say, can you make up the difference? It's helping our water runoff issues, but Prop O has no money for that. So I'm getting a reduction in the amount of work I get done, not an expansion in the amount of work I get done, and I'll never touch my backlog as it is, let alone we're adding to the backlog by doing this. So unless we are talking about, and maybe we should keep this in our minds, that as we have always talked about, there's going to be another Prop O. There has to be. The $500 million we put in Prop O is only half the issue. So we know that if we're talking about going for another issue of a Prop O type bond in another couple of years, that we allow that kind of activity to take place as part of the Prop O funding, then I can say there's a reasonable vision in the future that's going to take care of this problem. Up until that point, I can't in good conscience go to my voters and say, folks, we're going to reduce the amount of work we're doing this year because the work we're doing is different and it's better for you, but we're going to do less of it. And they're already screaming at me now because they can't get the work done.
So I want to make sure I understand your concern. You're looking at the cost to build the projects and then the cost to maintain them?
Not so much maintenance. I think
But that-
I think the maintenance won't be the problem as long as we're not doing the streets. As we're doing the swales, we're doing the curbs, entranceways, et cetera. That's great. But the cost factor is 25-30% higher. You're going to get less done. That's just a fact of life. And we're not getting enough done now. We're not keeping up. We haven't kept, 83 years? We haven't kept up with demand. We're getting further behind every year. I mean, I think this is the first year since World War II we've actually put enough money in the streets to stay even. So we're so far behind. We'll never get caught up in our lifetime. Never. Unless something extraordinary happens. And you're saying we're going to do less of it because we're going to spend more money to do what we're doing.
Well, what this would direct us to do, and this was passed through the Energy and Environment Committee already also, I believe, is it would direct us to put them in as pilot projects where feasible.
Okay.
And feasibility would include, we don't spell out what that means, but I can tell you one of the things we look at is if there's funding for it. I do think that because permeable pavement allows for infiltration, it's the type of thing that can be funded through the bond money that we've been tapping for these other types of Green Street elements, because it's a Prop 84 is a clean water bond that's been pushed through, it's being funded or implemented through the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission and the Coastal Conservancy. They're all looking at these infiltration types of devices, whether it be through a recessed vegetation basin, like the ones I showed you, or permeable pavement. They're all part of that whole idea. So it's the type of thing they're willing to fund. So the incremental cost might be available. I can't assure you that it would be, but that's the type of thing that we would look for, and that would be part of whether or not that type of option would even be agreed upon.
Before
Greg, is that what we're approving is for her to even flesh it out even more further at this point than actually implementing anything, because they're basically raising questions for report backs than it is actually saying this will be done or not be done. And you're basically giving yourself the authority to do more homework on the subject, and then in your report back periods, we'll get down to the nitty gritty of the cost of it.
Right. That doesn't require us to implement them citywide, period. It says start looking at pilot projects and use it to the maximum extent practicable.
Okay. Would you, in your report back then, and whatever it will be, January or whatever, report back on funding sources?
Yes.
Prop 84, DWP may have an ability to help us with that. On any federal environmental initiatives that may be going on in the new administration, whoever it is, and I think we know who it is, but whoever it is, that we explore that option too. Certainly, water is going to be the issue of the next couple of decades here.
Yes.
And we're on the forefront of it. So I think there should be some initiatives coming out of Washington, hopefully. All right?
We hope so.
I mean, if I'm not overstating it, this will set the tone for us to go forward
Yes.
more than it will have the implementing arms in it. I mean, this gives you the blessing to go forward.
Move forward and do it to the maximum
And then the
extent practical.
questions that Mr. Smith is asking get answered as we go forward with
Yes,
this outline.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
Those are good questions. I appreciate that you're raising them because those are very important concerns.
Yeah, and they need to be raised by yourself too as you go
Yes.
through the process. So the motion stands and it's approved and
Okay, so number 9 is
What we
approved.
said.
Okay, we can fold the recommendation of the May 21st, 2008 report, put that into here, which belongs. The portion in section C, we can fold it also into there. However, any responses will probably wind up in a separate council file since the subject matter is slightly different than
Very good.
the street materials itself.
very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
very
thank you.
much. It's a step in the right direction at this point.
Yes.
Baby steps.
And thank you for your support.
That's a framework.
Thank you.
What's left?
We have 3 items left, 4 items. We have 6, 8, 9, and 5. So shall we start with number 5? You, Mr. Smith.
Oh, yeah, just, okay.
Item number 5, City Administrative Officer Report relative to a proposed amendment to contract number C-106992 with SOMAS for street, stormwater, and other design and construction management services.
Good afternoon, council members. Mark Tulai, the Office of the CAO. The item before you today is a contract amendment for SOMAS to extend the contract term from 4 to 8 years. The amendment will allow for continuation of design services and design support through construction for 7 Prop O projects identified in page 2 of the CAO report. With me is Bureau of Engineering staff member Kendrick Okuda. He's program manager for Proposition O. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, the only concern I had is why were we unable to complete it in the first 4 years? Is it because we had took so long to get the Prop O approvals on these, or?
Well, in part, the contract award goes back 4 years, and it was no pre-established value and was under task orders not related to Prop O. Back in 2006, there was a task order solicitation 45, which was for Prop O, so the work actually didn't start on Prop O 2 years ago. That's
Yeah.
part of it.
Okay, that's what I kind of thought, but I want to make sure. All right, so I think, what is it, about 2/3 of the work actually it wasn't completed under this contract, so you have to, and then we didn't get started till late on it.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that's all, thanks.
So moved. Thank you. Number 6.
Item number 6, CAO report relative to the 2008-09 First Constructions Projects Report and related matters. Also, this item has been referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Good afternoon. Alma Gibson with the CAO's office. This is basically our continued effort to provide financial oversight of the city's capital projects, and our office is submitting to you our first construction projects report for fiscal year 08-09, which provides recommendations for funding adjustments related to the city's current construction projects. These financial adjustments consist primarily of reimbursements to the departments from general obligation bonds, the CIEP fund, and MICLA financings. Of the total $24 million that's recommended in transfers and appropriations, 16.8 is recommended for appropriations to GSD to perform construction work on various projects, such as the police stations, street service yards, and recreation parks and library projects. $109,000 of it is transferred to the Cultural Affairs in accordance with the Admin Code 19.85, which is regarding the 1% for the arts program. $2.5 million transfers to and within other city funds for better financial management for projects. And $5.3 million is for staff cost reimbursements for the Police Administration Building project and Prop Q public safety projects. Now, in addition, I want to add an addendum report that's dated October 14th. I believe copies are already within the city clerk's office. However, I have extra copies here, and they've been given to your deputies. And so, anyway, we want to include it because we've unfortunately didn't have, two projects were left out. And also, we went ahead and included some technical corrections to some account funds and fund numbers. And with that, if you have any questions regarding the projects in the report, we have representatives here to answer your questions.
I know we get a second bite of the apple, both Mr. Smith and I, because we are on budget.
You sure do. You get to hear it
I was
again.
just looking at the ones that I know directly here. Smith, do you have any-
I had one question. The Lopez Canyon canopy, is that on the building that burned down?
Good question. Let's see, we have anybody from engineering that knows about it? You know, we don't have,
I think that was a sanitation
I
building, but I'm not sure.
was
of
questioning that myself earlier, and I don't know.
Claudia Aguilar with the CAO's office. Actually, that project is not being managed by BOE, it's being managed by GSD, and we don't have GSD staff, but we can.
Just might ask them before it comes to budget
Yeah.
and finance if that's the same building or not. Yeah, no? It's not? Okay, good. Was there any building damage there on your GSD buildings?
This is a canopy over an existing concrete work area.
Oh, okay.
to provide, shade protection.
Actually, probably would have helped some of those vehicles we lost up there because they didn't have a canopy over them and, yeah. Yeah, okay. And then the Valley Bomb Squad, I just read it was just because there was an accidental discharge of the sprinkler system or something? Somebody goofed?
For the project, go ahead.
Melissa Krantz, Office of the CAO. The original design had the heating element placed too closely to the sprinkler, so it did trigger it. It has been fixed.
Great idea, okay.
Yeah.
There's no warranty on that? No,
No,
somebody
it was
didn't,
past-
just
no,
bad idea.
no, yeah.
All
It was a
right.
design.
You know, all the engineers are laughing back there.
I like all the Westchester projects here. I just want you to know that. I think I know other questions.
I didn't anyway.
So moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a note for record, in the addendum report, it also has been referred to the Arts Park Health and Aging, that particular piece. So, I'll have to clarify.
Aging?
We get it from there to budget, then bring it all to
Then-
budget.
Correct.
Yeah, why would it go?
I will have to talk with my management. I do not know why. Cannot-
Okay. Yeah,
Recommendation is that it goes because
yeah.
it's an art
So you need,
section and a
do we,
font
huh?
amount for art.
Oh.
in
That's
there.
all of
It
it.
doesn't have to go.
That is all of them, Mr.
We can't
Chairman.
make that correct.
Any other public comment? No other public comment? Smith, meeting adjourned.
So be it.